At the beginning of the story, the Bok family tries to regain its lost superpowers while standing on a cliff, but to no avail. While Mrs. Bok argues with her daughter Dong-hee, her depressed son Gwi-ju jumps into the ocean while reminiscing about his late wife. A bystander, Da-hye, rescues him by jumping into the water and later giving him CPR. A few days later, Mrs. Bok goes to a massage parlor where Da-hye works, and she cures her insomnia with her massage and herbal tea. She recognizes her from the beach and was so impressed with her work that she invites her to her house. She visits her luxurious mansion, where our alcoholic male lead finally has his first encounter with his savior. However, he ruins it by assuming she's only here for money. But it turns out that he isn't completely wrong, since our innocent female lead is actually a con artist who'd been married twice before and scammed both her ex-husbands for huge amounts of money. Even this time around, her goal was to suck the rich Boks dry, and her first step was by winning Mrs. Bok over with sleeping pills and Gwi-ju with words of affirmation. It starts to work when Mrs. Bok, who has premonitions in her sleep, sees Da-hye wearing their family ring and assumes she'll become her son's wife. Meanwhile, Da-hye's crime partner, Grace, infiltrates their family gym, and Gwi-ju has a hard time communicating with his estranged middle school daughter, Aina, whose birthday was coming up. On the big day, Mrs. Bok invites Da-hye, much to Gwi-ju's displeasure, and while Aina refuses to join the party since she hates her birthday and blames herself for her mother's death and her father's depression. Mrs. Bok blames her son for this, and the two get into a fight, after which she faints and is carried to the hospital, and Gwi-ju runs away. With only Aina left behind, Da-hye tries to win her over, only to learn that Aina knows she'd been adding sleeping pills to Mrs. Bok's tea. Later, however, Aina surrenders and has a meal with her, during which she explains how Dong-hee's obesity makes her unable to fly, and Mrs. Bok's insomnia makes her unable to dream, and Gwi-ju's depression keeps him from finding happiness in his past. She also warns her to leave this family of weirdos while she can. Later at night, when Gwi-ju returns home, Da-hye tells him to fight his depression for his daughter's sake, but he simply tells her to mind her own business, since he cannot save anyone anymore or even be there for them. However, once Da-hye leaves, he brings a stuffed toy to Aina's room and wishes her a happy birthday. It turns out that Gwi-ju's superpower is to travel back in time to a moment he felt happy in, but however, since he was never able to touch anything in the past to save others, these happy moments eventually become depressing to him. This got even worse for him on the day Aina was born, because a school near the hospital caught fire, and the fire caused his superior's death and ruined a lot of families. The guilt of feeling happy on such a day messed up his mental health and eventually caused the incident that took his wife away. Back in the present, Gwi-ju finds that Aina has thrown away all the plushies that he's ever gifted her, so he heads to a shopping mall to find her something better. There he's ambushed by Da-hye, who offers to help him buy a better gift. However, this results in an argument between them, which rips Da-hye's sleeve off. Eventually, she buys a pair of sneakers for her and hands them to Gwi-ju before he leaves. Just as soon as he does so, the fire alarm starts blaring in the mall, and Da-hye, who has an intense fear of fire, struggles to cope with it. However, Gwi-ju returns and comforts her by holding her hand before leaving once more. A few days later, when she asks him why he held her hand, he denies ever doing it, and meanwhile, Aina struggles to participate in school, so her teacher calls Gwi-ju and tells him to look after her better. This sends Gwi-ju on another drinking spree. However, just before he passes out from it, his father takes him on a blind date with Da-hye. Since he wasn't interested in pursuing a relationship with her, he drinks until he was stoned, while Aina was followed after by a shady man and hides herself in a public bathroom. She calls Gwi-ju from there, but Da-hye picks it up instead, and later helps a very tipsy Gwi-ju reach Aina at the said restroom. She also helps Aina deal with her lady problems, which makes Gwi-ju feel so grateful that he invites her to have a drink with him. There, Da-hye tells him how he can find happiness even in the smallest of things like riding the bicycle for the first time or eating shaved ice, and although he still believes he can never time travel again, he manages to do so later that night and ends up in a mall where he holds Da-hye's hand, just like she said so. The fact that he can only return to the moment with Da-hye doesn't sit right with Gwi-ju, and he wonders who she really is. The next day, Mrs. Bok asks Da-hye to quit her job and move in with them, but she asks to spend a bit more time with Gwi-ju first. However, when they finally set a date, Gwi-ju's wimpy ass stands her up. When she returns home, her adoptive mother, who's an ex-loan shark and a master scammer, tells her to keep pushing until the Bok family is deemed mentally incapable, and she, as Gwi-ju's wife, becomes their legal guardian. The next day she moves in with the Boks and brings a bouquet that she claims Gwi-ju got her on their date, although he completely denies it. Meanwhile, as Aina stalks her crush at school, her popular classmate, Hae Rim, approaches her and accidentally touches her glasses, making her lash out and ask that she never touch them again. On the other hand, after passing out from an intense workout, Dong-hee reminisces about her days as a supermodel who could fly to her heart's content. Later at night, Da-hye offers to shape Aina's brows, and although she opens up to her a little bit, it turns out that Aina's superpower was reading people's minds. So now, basically, she's aware of Da-hye's scheme. The next day at school, Aina attracts Hae Rim's attention, but while she praises her new look, her glasses get knocked off, and luckily, her crush picks them up for her, and she even gets to hear him thinking that she's pretty. Later that evening, Dong-hee catches her fiancé cheating on her with Grace, and asks him to leave while she moves back into her family's house. Meanwhile, a napkin roll catches fire while Da-hye prepares dinner, only for Gwi-ju to put it out. Later, he has dinner with both her and Aina, something that they rarely do in that family, and feels so happy about it, and then he travels back in time with the same bouquet and enjoys a date with her. A few days later, Dong-hee catches Da-hye mixing sleeping pills with Mrs. Bok's tea and forces her to drink it. While she gets tipsy from the effects later, she stalks Dong-hee to the family's secret vault where she witnesses her flying. Spooked by the discovery, she rushes out of the room and heads upstairs, where Gwi-ju saves her from tipping over her feet, only for Da-hye to see that he isn't visible in the mirror. She immediately rushes downstairs, only to collide with Gwi-ju once again, and upon realizing that there are two Gwi-jus in the house, she ends up fainting. That night, Mrs. Bok has a premonition in which she sees Da-hye on an ambulance stretcher right outside of her adoptive mother's sauna. Despite all the warnings, since Da-hye was too startled after witnessing the recent paranormal activities, she heads to the sauna to clear her head. There, her mother refuses to believe her and tells her to shut up, and registers their marriage as soon as possible, while Gwi-ju follows her into the sauna and walks into the cubicle just as she addresses the woman as her mother. But just before Gwi-ju gets an explanation from her, her uncle sets off the fire alarm, which cripples her once again. Gwi-ju tries to help her up, but they end up slipping on the wet floor, and Da-hye hits her head pretty badly. As she's rushed to the hospital, her mother explains to Gwi-ju how she adopted Da-hye after her drunken father froze to death one night after ignoring her his whole life. She also reveals that Da-hye survived a school fire a few years ago, which she didn't really want to survive. After Da-hye wakes up, Gwi-ju takes her home and explains everyone's superpowers to her, and meanwhile, Aina's relationship with her crush continues to develop, much to Hae Rim's annoyance, because she also likes him. She later asks Aina how she feels about him, but Aina reads her mind and lies that she thinks he's a jerk, something he overhears. Later that night, Da-hye prepares a fake marriage registration form and takes it to Gwi-ju's room, claiming that his future self brought it to her. She also lies that the man who saved her from the school fire 13 years ago looked exactly like him, and although he's convinced, he still believes that love needs to come first in a relationship and kisses her. They were both completely taken aback by it, and though Gwi-ju claims to be a tough man who felt nothing from it, he keeps on going back to that moment despite not wanting to. The next day, he even lies that he felt nothing from it to Da-hye's face, only to be slapped right across his face. While he recovers from the reality check, Mrs. Bok's antique watch goes missing, and everyone suspects Dong-hee stole it, while she claims it was Da-hye. In reality, however, it was Aina who stole it to gift it to Hae-rim on her birthday. The girl even asked to borrow Aina's shoes, which the people pleaser easily lends her. Meanwhile, Mr. Bok investigates Da-hye's adoptive family and discovers that her mother is an ex-convict. He immediately calls his wife to warn her about it, only to learn that the ex-convict was already at his house drinking tea with his poor wife. She honestly tells her about her criminal history and claims she's trying to become a better person. However, she's more worried about her daughter, who quit her job and moved in with them without any promise of marriage. After the meeting concludes, Aina returns home and Da-hye notices that she wasn't wearing the shoes that she bought for her, making her wonder if she's getting bullied at school. Since Aina's school life reminds her of how she was bullied in the past, Da-hye heads to her school to investigate this matter, only to find Hae-rim wearing the stolen watch and shoes. She asks Aina if she'd like to talk to her father about the bullying that she's faced, but Aina blackmails her, and she reveals that she knows that she wants to hoard their 50 billion won property. This news scares her so much that she mindlessly ends up getting locked in a school gym that reminds Da-hye of her past and how she was locked into one by her bullies the day their school caught fire. However, Gwi-ju saves her this time, making her cry in relief while recalling how no one came to look for her in the past. That day, Da-hye realizes she's falling for Gwi-ju and backs out of the relationship, and Mrs. Bok's paranoia about making an ex-convict's daughter their son's bride also helps. However, Gwi-ju refuses to let her go this time, and tries to become a better person for her by showing up at the gym from then on, cleaning up the wine bottles from his room, and even showing up at the sauna for help. However, Da-hye shuts him out, claiming that she's scared of his supernatural abilities. One evening, she meets Aina, who asks her to return to their house, and even opens up about her ability to read minds, much to Da-hye's surprise. A few days later, while Aina hangs out with her friends, Hae-rim declares that she'll confess to their mutual crush today, only for the crush to confess to Aina instead. This is overheard by Hae-rim, who breaks off their friendship and returns all of Aina's gifts. On the other hand, Gwi-ju continues to make efforts to impress Da-hye, and after Mrs. Bok had a premonition about their wedding ceremony, he proposes to her once again. This time, due to a lot of family pressure and also her growing feelings for him, Da-hye says yes. However, on their wedding day, she confesses to being a professional scammer in front of everyone and backs out of the marriage because she doesn't want to hurt Gwi-ju. This breaks Gwi-ju's heart, and while he finds Da-hye's confession hard to believe, Dong-hee finds their family ring in Da-hye's suitcase, confirming her suspicions, while Grace follows her around to keep their secret from being discovered. Gwi-ju has a hard time recovering from his broken marriage and keeps spiraling back into the past to understand where he went wrong. On the other hand, Da-hye's mother locks her up in the room after she says she wants to quit her scamming side hustle. She still refuses to believe Mrs. Bok has precognitions, while Mr. Bok struggles to tell his wife how Gwi-ju's ability has evolved, making her his destined soulmate. Meanwhile, Aina continues to get isolated by Hae-rim, and after reading her mind to discover how much she hates her, she loses her glasses and leaves her school. While Gwi-ju was still stuck in his past, Aina ends up at Da-hye's sauna, and her mother tells her to use Aina to resume their attempt to rob the box. However, she wasn't interested in that anymore. Aina wonders if she quit her scheme out of love, but Da-hye dismisses her, and later, after she buys her an intensely expensive pair of glasses, Aina tells her she read her mother's mind, and that the said lady is now testing her loyalty. Right then, Gwi-ju arrives and takes Aina away before turning back to Da-hye and lecturing her about getting her shit together because somebody gave his life to save her from the fire. Just as she leaves, Da-hye finds Gwi-ju from the future, who tells her to stop him right now and warns him that his sister was in trouble. True to his word, back at the gym, Grace pushes Dong-hee off the railing to see if she flies. However, Gwi-ju saves her in the nick of time. They rush her to the hospital, where Gwi-ju explains to her how Da-hye helped save her. However, when Mrs. Bok gets there, she harshly slaps Da-hye and makes her leave. Once the Boks return home, Aina calls her father an idiot for still not understanding why Da-hye left him, and he returns to their wedding to realize that she was slapped by her mother for ruining their scheme, which she was forced into from the beginning. Realizing that she loves him, he heads to the sauna and proposes to exchange money for spending more time with Da-hye. Although her mother hops on the bandwagon right away, Da-hye was reluctant and reasons that she has feelings for him, which is why she can't keep her cool around him. However, Gwi-ju was persistent and begins pestering her from then onwards whenever she was in the sauna or on a date with someone else. In fact, after he ruins her potential fourth marriage, they barely outrun the man's psycho wife and laugh it off before deciding to have some dinner together. There, Gwi-ju asks her why she was with the strange people that she's with, but when she doesn't give him a proper answer, he returns to his past the day Da-hye was orphaned. After discovering that her mother adopted her so she could repay her father's debts, Gwi-ju comforted the heartbroken young Da-hye. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bok continues to have premonitions about Da-hye, while her husband spends more time at a dance club with his side chick. One night, however, things go south and the woman's husband catches them and threatens to file a lawsuit against Mr. Bok if he doesn't pay him 2 billion yen. The next day, Gwi-ju takes Da-hye on a date along with her uncle and travels to another town to buy her favorite childhood shaved ice. In that town, he buys her the winning lottery ticket as well, and travels back in time to enjoy the ice cream with her, and also hands her the ticket so she can repay her debts and break free from her adoptive mother. Da-hye, however, hands her this ticket to Mrs. Bok and asks her to keep her son away from her, but eventually, this ticket gets stolen by Mr. Bok, who hands it to the greedy husband, who in turn hands it to Da-hye's mother, who turns out to be the mastermind behind everything. On the other hand, Grace and Dong-hee team up to manipulate her ex-fiancé, Ji-han, into marrying her again, and Aina's phone gets broken by some bullies, after which Da-hye's uncle rescues her and they form a peculiar bond. One night, Gwi-ju asks Da-hye about their family's heirloom, and she reveals that it was given to her by the man who rescued her from the fire, proving that it was Gwi-ju. He also proves his mother's accusations wrong by finding the ring safe and sound in their locker, making Da-hye's ring a double from the past. A few days later, Mrs. Bok receives pictures of her husband dancing with another woman and tells him to leave her house at once. He argues that he did it because his own dream to dance got buried somewhere beneath her greed, but she doesn't budge. As the poor old man leaves, the house ends up in chaos, and Da-hye reveals to Gwi-ju that it was her mother's doing. Meanwhile, everyone at school begins to bully Aina, making her run away, and Gwi-ju and Da-hye go looking for her with the help of Da-hye's uncle, who knows a lot more about her than her own father. On their search, Gwi-ju realizes how lonely Aina has been, but they fail to find her until Gwi-ju from the past returns and tells them that she's locked in her school gym. The culprit turns out to be Hae-rim, whose jealousy stems from the school's hottie's crush on Aina. However, just before Aina passes out from the suffocation, Gwi-ju and Da-hye arrive and rescue her, and later, after Aina calms down following a discussion with Da-hye, she finally has a heart-to-heart conversation with Gwi-ju, in which she admits that she's always felt like the reason that ruined both her parents, but Gwi-ju reassures her that she's the best thing that's ever happened to him. Aina eventually tells him about her secret superpower, and he later teaches her how to ride a bike, and Aina's newfound confidence also helps her confess to her crush, and the two start dating. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bok has has a premonition about Gwi-ju's death and rushes to her husband's dance club to tell him about it. On the other hand, Gwi-ju finally manages to return the moment Aina was born and tells Da-hye he's going to save her from the fire. Over the next few days, Mrs. Bok reveals her dream to all her family members, excluding Aina, and insists that no matter what they do, they can never prevent her dreams from coming true. What they can do, however, is to make sure Gwi-ju's final days make him as happy as possible. To make sure of this, Da-hye moves back in, and they all spend their time together as a family. Meanwhile, Hae-rim gets what she deserves after getting reprimanded for locking Aina all alone, and she gets isolated by everyone at school. A few days pass, and Gwi-ju begins to sneak into Da-hye's bed at night, and on such nights, she proposes that they go on a trip together. However, on the day of the trip, she sends him back in time, and while he was gone, Da-hye orchestrates a car accident to fake her death in hopes of keeping Gwi-ju from going back in time to save her from the fire and dying in the process. As Gwi-ju's life falls apart over the next few months, Grace helps Dong-hee lose weight and gets ready for her wedding with the greedy Ji-han. However, even after losing so much weight, Dong-hee was unable to fly, and meanwhile, Aina believes that Da-hye wasn't dead and goes to the sauna to investigate. After looking into her uncle's eyes, she discovered the truth and tells Gwi-ju that Da-hye was staying at the beach house, hiding from them. As Gwi-ju heads out to find her, Aina returns home only to learn that she sent her father to his own death. On the other hand, Gwi-ju finds Da-hye and tells her that she cannot leave him just like that, after making him able to sleep, breathe, and walk again. She reveals that she only did it so he wouldn't go back to the past, and the two reconcile with a sweet kiss. Gwi-ju ends up spending the night at the beach house, where to find the cold of the sea, the two cuddle under blankets, and he promises Da-hye that he won't travel back in time until after they've lived a beautiful life together. He meets up with her mother the following day and explains to her that she did not run away from them and only did it so she could save him. The reconciled couple return home to discover that Aina now knows the truth and has locked herself up from the guild. She later opens up to Da-hye about how much of a curse their abilities are, but she talks her out of it and teaches her to embrace herself for who she is. Meanwhile, Ji-han was planning to steal the 50 billion won that Dong-hee was to inherit while he messes around with his other girlfriend. His cheating was captured on camera by Dae-hee, who later threatens Ji-han to pay her 200 million won if she doesn't want these photos to end up in Dong-hee's inbox. While his broadcast manages to arrange this money from various loan sharks, Gwi-ju catches Dong-hee eating in secret one night and tells her she was her most beautiful self when she was younger and happy. He also deduces that her inability to fly doesn't stem from her weight, but rather her unhappiness, the reason behind which is likely her engagement. A few nights later, once Da-hye has received the ransom money from Ji-han, Grace forces Dong-hee to show her their new house, where they catch Ji-han messing around with his side chick. Despite his begging, Dong-hee breaks off their engagement for good, and after he pushes Grace off the building while struggling to snatch the money bag from her, Dong-hee manages to fly as high as she could before and saves her. A few days later, Gwi-ju takes Aina to the zoo where they share some cotton candy, and he reassures her that he isn't going to die and leave her alone. Meanwhile, Da-hye meets up with her mother, who confesses that she loves her like her real child and is glad that she's alive. One evening, after watching his parents dance to an old song, Gwi-ju returns in time to find Da-hye. He helps her learn cycling to make sure she isn't bullied by anyone, but in the process, ends up getting the scratch on his neck that Da-hye has mentioned her savior from 13 years ago had, making him wonder if he'll be dead by the time this scar heals. Over the next few days, Gwi-ju hides the scar by wearing a turtleneck, and Aina practices hard for her upcoming dance competition while also trying to convince Hae-rim to join them. On the other hand, Dong-hee's romance blooms with Da-hye's uncle, while Ji-han continues to harass her and threatens her with a video of her flying. One night, Da-hye finds the scar on Gwi-ju's neck, and even though he tries to comfort her, she couldn't help bawling her eyes out. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bach continues to have visions of her son dying from a fire and struggles to cope with it. On the day of Ina's dance competition, both the Bach and the Sauna families show up in style to support their little girl. However, Dong-hee's fun was spoiled when Ji-han threatens to hurt Ina if she doesn't show up to a certain location in her school. She reluctantly gets there only to find he has spread out candles and rose petals to propose to her for marriage. He even threatens to set himself on fire if she doesn't say yes. However, she calls him a coward and leaves. Meanwhile, Hae-rim shows up on Ina's request and the group dances together, much to Gwi-ju and Da-hye's pride. Ina also reconciles with Hae-rim later, and on the other hand, while watching the smoke from the next performance, Mrs. Bach realizes that her dream wasn't a premonition of the past but of the present. She tells her husband that there will be a fire here and they all begin to evacuate, while Da-hye was out to find Ina and Gwi-ju has gone back in the past. True to Mrs. Bach's speculation, Ji-han's little stunts set the school on fire. Da-hye, on the other hand, overcomes her fear of fire and saves Ina and finds her just before the two of them suffocate. However, their misery hasn't ended yet since the wall behind them begins to collapse, and right then, Gwi-ju arrives and holds the wall while Da-hye gets Ina to safety. Moments before he dies too, Gwi-ju returns in time and saves young Da-hye from the fire, only to really lose his life while shielding her. 5 years pass and the family commemorates Gwi-ju's death while Da-hye plays around with their child, Nu-ri, and it turns out that her son can go back in time and bring things back from the past. Intrigued by this, Da-hye asks him to bring his father back as a joke, only for him to do so in reality. With Gwi-ju finally back, the family reunites and they all have lunch together. This is where Da-hye and Gwi-ju's rocky relationship ends. Leave a comment down below to let us know which story you'd like to see next. Also, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you guys on the next video.